Good afternoon, everybody. At least half of you. Everybody's having a good time so far? Yeah. It's all been excellent? That was kind of a lackluster response. We're looking for, I used to be in the military, so I'll make you say it over and over and over again. So how are we all doing? Hey, there we go. Everybody's awake. Right on. So, it seems to me that we have invested quite a lot in BIM at this point, and we've passed the point of no return. And so what I'd like to share with you today is maybe some lessons that will help everybody here. So, I mean, if you look at what really keeps you up at night, or if you're like me, what really gets you up in the morning, is the desire to not fail. We really want to not fail as often as possible. I've learned through the GIS industry how to fail. I've done it quite a bit, actually, and that's what I hope to share with you here. There's really two questions that should be in your mind right now. First of all, who's the guy behind the podium? And second of all, you might be asking, what is GIS? So I'll start off with me. My name is Evan McNeil, as we've discussed. I started my career with the Canadian military. I came up through surveying. I spent a lot of time in the field. Eventually moved into the office, got into CAD, got into design, got into management, got into GIS. Ended off the last 5 years or so with corporate development with an international firm. A lot of interesting projects that I've been involved in, from big-inch pipelines to mine site development and land development and things like that. So I've got this sort of wide range of experience in construction. Along the way, I've had the absolute fortune and privilege to work with a lot of industry's brightest. And every time I found one of those individuals, I clung on to them and got as much information as I could from them. And I'm hoping to share a lot of that with you here today. I've also had the luck of working alongside of some rather dull people. And trust me, they taught me as much as the intelligent ones did. So that's me. The next question is GIS. Show of hands, how many people know what GIS is? Generally. How many of you actually worked within a GIS environment? So we got a number. Any GIS experts? Not at all. All right. That's good, because this isn't a GIS forum. So, geographical information systems. That's me. I like green. Geographical information systems. So the most common example has been discussed here today is Google Maps. Right? So what do you have? You have a whole bunch of data put together in a built-for-purpose model. Sounds familiar? That can tell you the driving distance from Moncton to Montreal and every Tim Hortons along the way with their operational hours. GIS has been used in government and industry for decades, and for the last 10 years it's become ubiquitous with every smartphone application, every website that demands your location for some unknown reason. And to the construction industry, GIS has been the tool that's allowed large amounts of data to be collected, overlaid, organized, analyzed, and ultimately communicated. Now, if this topic is of interest to you, have a look for it's a documentary series that Penn State put together called The Geospatial Revolution. And they cover off all sorts of case studies and things like that. You might not be an expert in GIS, but you're playing with it every single day if you exist in this part of the world. So it's my contention that GIS and BIM are so closely related that we can learn valuable lessons by understanding our shared history. And here's why I believe this to be true. So it was about 5 years ago. I had been developing a team of people that were once CAD designers that we'd brought forward into GIS. We had a great team working together all the time. We had all these tools available to ourselves, and we really found a lot of success. And then as a company, we decided that we were going to get into BIM. So we hired a global BIM manager who will remain nameless for now. And basically he and I were set to have a meeting together and to sit down and discuss how we were going to integrate BIM across our Canadian production teams. And I really didn't know what to think about this meeting. I didn't know where it was going to go. I didn't know exactly where we were going to start. So I sat down by myself and did a little bit of introverted work, and I came up with a list of things that I thought he needed to know about GIS, and then tried to describe it. And this sketch here is an example of how I tried to describe what GIS was to him. Interestingly enough, he did the exact same thing. And we discussed that right at the beginning of the meeting, that we each had made lists, and we compared them, and we found that over 70% of them were identical, outside of the acronym. So we could switch out GIS for BIM, and it was identical as we went through. The 4 areas that are shown on the screen, so technology being the software, the hardware, the infrastructure, the people being the fact that we already had talent. We already had companies full of people that knew their trade, and we were trying to move them into a new paradigm, right? Processes. Between BIM and GIS, the processes are very similar. We're talking about the last square there, or oval, is data. So having a solid data management practice is crucial for both BIM and GIS. So very, very similar. And so that's why I still think it's a valid argument that we have the ability to learn from everything that we've screwed up in BIM. Sorry, everything that we've screwed up in GIS and applying it to the BIM world. So what can GIS teach us about marketing? Or more specifically, how we talk or promote our complex services. Right, so when we're talking to clients, what do we tell them? The company that I worked for had a long history in GIS. In fact, we're pioneers in GIS. We had a good reputation as experts in the field, and yet it was still difficult to convince our long-standing clients to use GIS, even the basic functionality of it. And it was troubling from a business development point of view to try to figure out why. And so essentially we sat down and we invented the secret timeline of GIS in Western Canada. And what we discovered is that in the mid-'80s, there was a group of, we'll call them land surveyors and GIS experts, masters, that came through and did a very good job of selling everybody on the possibilities that existed within GIS. And they were very excited about what they were selling. They loved it. And they oversold it. And they basically said, your imagination is the only limit. And we can see some people, I'm not going to say anybody in this room, but some people in BIM have that same propensity to say, you know, we're going to be able to manage all of the buildings in the entire globe with, yes, that's great to have that forward thinking, but be careful about what you're actually delivering, right? So the long-term effect of this is that these individuals in the 80s, they landed a ton of projects, like a lot, and they failed at a lot of them as well. To the point that now GIS is almost a dirty word within the industry. You don't want to talk about it. The long-term effect is that these guys, the major companies, won't really reap the benefits of technology that's right in front of them, which is proven. So it's unfortunate. So the lesson here is to be specific about what benefits will be actualized. So a few months ago at the CanBIM event in Calgary, I saw this chart that's up on the slide, and it was popping up in a few places. And this is a great example about being specific about what is hoped to be achieved. It shows the BIM workflow. Hopefully you can see that. It's the green line, and basically the idea is to move all of the design and all the costs and effort to the left into the second phase of the project, reduce risk, reduce cost, and so on, and doing it in a measurable way. And here's the funny part. I have personally drawn this chart on dozens of boardroom whiteboards over the last 15, 20 years, long before I ever heard of BIM, because this is the exact same chart we use for GIS. And it's the same idea, capturing the information, getting it into one place, and designing in a data-rich environment. The case study for this, so we basically, as an industry in GIS, we did mess up a lot of projects. This is one that we did very well. So we had a client that was coming into Canada for the first time. They were going to build a 420-kilometer pipeline in Alberta, effectively known as the Boreal Pipeline. They were told it would be about a 36-month process to get from the initial stages through to the approval of the application, through the regulatory process and all that sort of stuff. And so we sat down and we were very, very specific with them. And we told them, if you use our GIS platform, you will be able to make better decisions faster. And that's it. We didn't say anything else. We said we're going to improve your ability to manage data, and we're going to improve your ability to communicate. Simple, right? We put some metrics on it, and ultimately, the results of that project is that we had it done in 18 months to the day. So we basically cut the time in half that they estimated it would take them. Now, part of that lesson is that if you share information, things will happen faster. If you manage it properly, things will happen faster. And really the other aspect of it is the ability to measure that time. It gives you the ability to take credit for it. And if you don't take credit for it, some project manager will. So it's really important that if you do lay out at the beginning of a project that we're going to use BIM because we're going to get these benefits, at the end of the project, make sure that you've measured those results and that you're comparing them and saying this is what we managed to deliver for you. People, both GIS and BIM, have the same challenge in educating existing staff. So most of the people that will be doing the heavy lifting have a background in CAD or design, and they might not know exactly what they're getting into. Again, in my experience, early in our GIS integration program, we were struggling. We had hired GIS grads, and we gave them the software, and we gave them some projects, and we just figured everything would just happen by itself, and it wasn't happening. So then we sat down and we said, well, we've got this career development planning tool, so let's use it. So we did our one-on-one interviews with all of our staff. We talked to them, we asked them questions. One of the things I did was I had them rate their own skills within certain areas, one of them being GIS. So one individual had rated himself at 100% for GIS. So he had a 100% competency rating with GIS, and to the best of my knowledge, he was at about 10%. And so we had this gap, right? And so obviously there's an opportunity for a conversation, right? So we sat down and I asked him, and he said, yeah, I use all of the websites that have GIS in them all of the time, so I'm an expert. And so I had to explain to him that we authored those GIS websites, and the light went off. You could see his eyes open up, and he was very excited to, learn about this new world that he had only just discovered. Within a week, he was involved in GIS projects across Central America. He was a surveyor from Costa Rica, so his knowledge of the area, his cultural awareness, and his bilingualism was a major asset for that project. And then he ended up going back to school for GIS and got his degree. And now he's sitting in Dryden Valley for the town of Dryden Valley as a GIS tech, and he couldn't be happier. So. And that's actually him. That's not just a random person from the internet. I could have done that, but I didn't. Anyways, so what do we take away from this? Talk to your people, ask questions, and be prepared to repeat yourself as often as you need to, especially when it comes to your vision. And I mean that sincerely. Repeat yourself, repeat yourself, repeat yourself. Get used to it. All right, the profession. So in my experience in the early days of GIS, we had two types of experts. Those that had a geomatics background, so a survey engineering background, and another group of individuals that had an IT background. And fair enough, it's a very, from an old person point of view, it has to do with computers, so I guess the IT guys should be in charge, right? Hands down, the people with the GIS experience or the geomatics background were far and away better. And funny story, as a matter of fact, I had one friend that graduated from the U of C in Calgary and then got a job with the federal government as a GIS technologist in a department that was run by and populated by IT people. So you had an IT manager with a whole bunch of IT people that had basically just decided to call themselves GIS one day, and they were completely backwards to the point that when he attended meetings, he would ask questions with lots of GIS-y type words in it. And what he learned after getting to know everybody better is that they spent their time writing down all these words and then Googling them out right directly after the meeting, right? So it's very important at all steps to make sure that you've got the right profession involved, right? So fast forward to Autodesk University 2014. As a surveyor, I'm going to Autodesk University and I'm still waiting for BIM to matter to surveyors. Right? Because we've already got GIS worked out, we know how to do geolocation, we've got coordinate correction and all that kind of stuff, but we still haven't really cared about BIM. So I sit down for one talk, again, I'm not going to point out the individual, But basically that's what he did. So he took all of the GIS data that was available, the terrain, the aerial photography, he blended it all together and made a beautiful site, and then went off into Revit and got the shell of his building that he wanted to place. And I thought, here's the good part. Here's where he shows us how he's going to actually place this with a high degree of precision. And it was one of these. And we'll put it about here. And wherever he released his mouse is where the building ended up in this site. And then in my brain, I'm screaming, that's not how it's done, man. What are you doing? And then he even turns around and, as I'm screaming, changes the elevation, bumps it up a couple feet, one down, about there. That's about how you do it. And that was the end of his show. It was sort of, here's how you get all of this highly integrated information together, and here's how you screw it all up. Is basically how I saw that. So use the right tool for the job. Now, I'm not calling anybody here a tool, but it's important at all points to make sure that you've got the right people doing the right type of work. In a new industry, BIM is still fairly new. You're going to have lots of people that just don't have the right background. Get them the right background. Get them the right training. Right? If they're passionate about it, get in there, learn it. A great example of this, again, speaking for the surveyors that aren't here, completing a legal cadastral survey is complicated, right? Identifying the boundaries, the building envelope, compiling the site information, the existing ground, the design grade, the utilities, all of this stuff overlays, and it's complicated, right? So make sure that you've got the right tool for the right job. GIS Monster. So this is only a 30-minute talk, so I couldn't go into all of the stories that I have that you can imagine. So I've categorized the rest of them all into 3 basic sets. So there's the black hole. So if you've ever worked with a big corporation that has a GIS, they're quite often referred to as the black hole. And what this tells me is, in the background, the GIS is there probably for the accounting group. So there's a bean counter that needs to know that there's a certain asset that's in existence somewhere, and we need some data for it. And what happens is you have everybody in the company that's working on anything funneling information into the GIS, and it never applies back. Hence the black hole. Then there's the $1 million GIS. So most of the time you spec out a project and you say, this is maybe going to cost you $100,000. Here's how we're going to have all of our data flowing in. This is how we're going to maintain it. This is how we're going to share it. And then you get to the hard work of actually taking all of the existing data, wherever it is and whatever format it's in, and trying to put it together. And if you haven't done a good enough analysis of what's available, then you're going to end up with some sort of a Frankenstein model where you're stitching together these pieces, right? And they're not going to fit together properly, and there's going to be gaps in the data, and then you're going to turn around and try to actually do what it is that you said you would do with the model, and you won't be able to because the data's not there, right? You'll lose the functionality. And the last type of GIS monster is the scrap pile. So basically everybody providing data into a GIS must be held to account, and if they aren't, if there isn't a gatekeeper, if there isn't a central philosophy for collecting and sharing the information, you will end up with literally a pile of paper. So what do you do about these things? Well, here's another case study for you. So this is a mine site in northern Alberta. And this individual, he was one of my favorite people to work with. He worked for Total, and he had this mannerism, which is sort of hard to describe, but it's easier to do, where he'd ask you about your part of the project, and he'd say, so you need this, this, and this, and then it's this, right? And that little hand motion, the washing your hands of it, and we're done, means you don't get to talk anymore. We've got exactly what you need, and we're done, right? This is done. I don't have to even think about it. I can go to bed now. So what he did was he joined himself at the hip with the GIS tech. So every single meeting that we went to, the GIS guy was there running the table, right? He had the screen showing. Everybody understood that all of the information that was being requested of them was going to be up on screen during the next meeting. So you knew exactly what was required of you, and you were getting something back from it, right? So he eliminated the black hole. The project was scoped out with a very, very intentional purpose. We needed to define the boundaries so that they could do the rest of the detailed design work within the mine site. There's lots of regulations about how close you can be to rivers and so forth, so we needed a high precision boundary. So that was the purpose of what we were doing. And the rest of the GIS work was solely for the purpose of increasing the ability of the designers to design. So it wasn't $1 million monster. It was very clear exactly what it was supposed to do, no more, no less. And the third, the pile of scraps. Everybody knew the GIS tech. He was in every meeting and he was right beside the guy that was in charge. So you knew that these two guys were talking all the time. And you did everything in your power to keep him on side. So the lesson is, project communication must be two ways. Build data models with specific purposes. So again, have dreams about what might happen in the future, but right now, whatever you're getting paid for, make sure you're delivering that. And control your inputs. And the caveat there is to make sure that that's in the contract. Because if you've got a group of people, I think this is something that's well known within the BIM industry. If you've got different companies responsible for different things, if it's not in the contract who the gatekeeper is, you're going to have problems. All right, on to Evan's big fail. So this is where we do the midnight confession sort of thing, and I I get right down to what I screwed up. So I'd moved my family to Calgary. We had packed up and moved down, and we'd started a new office, and we had built a whole production team. We had successfully integrated GIS practice into what we were doing. We had the ability to use the right tool for the right job. Not to toot my own horn, but we did really well. We had a great group. So where do you think my biggest problem was? I had moved out of the headquarters office into a Calgary location, built my own kingdom, and I didn't take anybody else along with me. And so I fell prey to the notion of, if I build it and do a great job of it, everybody will just say, oh yeah, Evan nailed it, let's do exactly what he's doing. And that's just not the case. That's patently false. That will never work. Essentially, people look forward to the journey, right? They want to be able to learn by the mistakes along the way. And they don't want to have just I used to be a young guy in Calgary that basically just shows up and says, hey, look, I did it right, you guys have to do it my way, right? It's a huge mistake. At Globally Training, so I'm now with Globally Training, and we have a client who ultimately is getting a gold star for doing this right. So the gold star goes to Morrison Hirschfield. They didn't just finish a BIM project and expect everyone else in the company to follow. Instead, they started a BIM design contest. So now they've reached out across all of their offices. They've got 8 or 10 teams lined up, and each team is comprised of BIM coordinators and department managers and business development, project managers, each that have a different aspect to play within building information modeling. They have spent time, as you can tell by the graphic, designing a communication strategy which now informs their communication plan. Their senior leadership is fully invested. The result is a company that is focused and engaged, and what else is really cool is how we're also building a custom e-learning course, complete with CAN BIM certified software for all of the teams so that nobody misses a beat. And a special shout out as well to SolidCAD, because they're providing the instructors. So Morrison Hirschfield is using all of the resources that they have available to them, and they're making sure that everybody has the opportunity to come on the journey. They've literally invited everybody along using an existing project, and I think that they're going to be best off for it. So given how close BIM and GIS are related, we can learn valuable lessons by understanding our history, our shared history. Here's the list of topics we covered here today, and to summarize, I'd like to point out that technology is not our biggest challenge. I'll say it again, we spend a lot of time in the demonstration room over there talking about technology, and it is still not our biggest challenge. Processes, data management, they aren't our biggest challenge either. They're important, but if GIS has taught me anything, it's that our biggest challenge is social. Communicate. Never stop communicating. Communicate, communicate, communicate. And leadership. There's no substitute for solid leadership. And just remember, manage systems, lead people. That's all I have to say about that. Are there any questions?